Hello, my YouTube family. Alright. So, on today's day, we're going to be reading Mental Dynamite by Andrew Carnegie and Napoleon Hill. Good evening, Anonymous. Anonymous, but CIA. Good evening, my friend. Alright. So, we're going to start. Guys, I'm looking for the pages. Give me a second. Let me warm up. Let's see, self discipline. Okay. Okay. Discipline, taking possession of one's mind. Alright, so we're gonna be reading part 1, which is it's on self-discipline, taking possession of one's own mind. Thinking, education, knowledge, native ability, these are nothing but empty words unless they are translated into action. By Andrew Carnegie. Alright. Introduction to Self-Discipline by Napoleon Hill. This chapter cannot be assimilated in 1 or 2 readings. It covers a subject that overlaps the other principles of this book. The analysis at the end of the chapter describes one of the most important subjects in the entire field of mental phenomena. The principle through which the 6 departments of the mind may be organized and directed to any desired end. The chart of the 6 departments of the mind included towards the end of our conversation on this lesson provides a quick reference to the forces that must be brought under self-discipline if one is to become the master of oneself. The principle by which this mastery may be attained is described in detail, but do not be misled by the apparent simplicity of the principle to underrate its astounding influence or the scope of its possibilities, because it is the master key to the entire philosophy of achievement. With a working knowledge of this principle, one may take full possession of one's mind, a feat that can be accomplished by no other method. Through this principle, every adversity, temporary defeat, worry, and negative emotion, such as anger and fear, can be organized and used for the attainment of one's major purpose in life. This principle explains Andrew Carnegie's statement that every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. Moreover, it describes how the seed may be germinated and developed into a full-blown flower of opportunity. Do not try to familiarize yourself with this principle until you have carefully read and digested Mr. Carnegie's approach to it. Follow the instructions for the use of this principle to the letter. Then observe the astounding change that will come over you. Your imagination will become more alert. Your enthusiasm will become keener. Your initiative will become more active. Your self-reliance will be obviously greater. Your personality will become more magnetic, and you will find people seeking you out who previously paid you no attention. The scope of your vision will be extended. Your problems will melt before you as flakes of snow melt under the rays of the sun. Your hopes and your ambitions will be strengthened. You will begin to see the world through a different set of eyes. Your relationships with other people will become more pleasant and harmonious. These and other promises of even greater proportions will reveal themselves to you if you get from this chapter all that has been presented for you. Do not read this chapter hurriedly. Think as you read. Test the lesson by your own experiences and observe how accurately it portrays certain truths that you will readily recognize although you may never have understood their full significance. Read with pencil in hand and underscore the lines that impress you most. Come back to these lines often and make the thought behind them your own. Alright, now we're moving on to editor's note. As we begin, let's quickly reflect on the best way to read books, such as this one. Hill's books have sold more than 120 million copies around the world, yet not everyone who reads them feels their power. Why do you think that is? Many people have mentioned to me that not only were these books truly transformational, but also that just staring at the cover often made them feel better, whereas others have tried reading them but failed to notice any life changes at all. Why is that? Why is that the same words on the same pages turns dreams to reality for some while being retained as fantasy for others? This dichotomy comes from how the reader or the listener of the audiobooks approaches it. This is not a novel that you skim through it and then piece on a shelf to get the most out of this book. Keep a notepad handy and think about how you can apply these lessons in your own life. Then apply them as you will, see? Action is a core theme of this book and of the entire achievement philosophy, just as it should be for you. Importantly, research shows that you're 42% more likely to achieve your goals if you write them down. That's how the true power of this book is unleashed and how your immense potential is ignited. Alright, we're going to move on to the next page now. Alright. On the relationship between thought and action, Carnegie notes, without control over thoughts, there can be no control over deeds. Even the best formula is useless unless it is expressed in action. That's alright. Self-discipline, taking possession of one's own mind. Perhaps there is no word in the English language that better describes the major requirement for individual achievement than the subject of this chapter. This entire philosophy serves primarily to enable people to develop control over themselves, this being the greatest of all the essentials of success. In this chapter, Mr. Carnegie has taken great pains to emphasize the necessity of self-discipline. because he learned from his own experience in dealing with thousands of people that no one may hope to achieve noteworthy success without first gaining control over themselves. He learned from his own experience and from his observation of other people that when a person once takes possession of their own mind and begins to rely upon it, that person has achieved a victory of the highest order, one that places them within easy grasp of whatever they set their head and their heart upon. Self discipline then may be defined as the act of taking possession of one's own mind. The definition is short and clear, but it is so charged with meaning that to overlook its significance may invalidate this entire philosophy. Fortunately, however, the method by which we may take possession of our own mind is known, and it will be clearly described in these chapters. But mere knowledge of the method will not be of any use until this knowledge is put into action. Self discipline is something we cannot acquire as we learn the multiplication table, but it can be acquired through persistence by following the procedure outlined in this chapter. The price of self discipline, therefore, is eternal vigilance and commitment, no, continuous effort in carrying out these instructions. In no other way can it be acquired, and it has no other bargaining price. We get self discipline through our own efforts, or we do not acquire it at all. On to the next page, right? Without self discipline, an individual may be likened to a dry leaf that is blown back and forth, round and round by the stray winds of circumstance, without the slightest chance of of coming within the sight of anything that even remotely resembles personal success. People who take possession of their own minds and use them may set their own price tag on themselves and make life pay what they ask. Those who fail to do so must take whatever life tosses at them, and we need offer no evidence that this always is barely more than the mere necessities. I take you now to the private study of Andrew Carnegie, where you will be privileged to sit in while he instructs me, his student, on the subject of self discipline. All right. Hill, Mr. Carnegie, you have you have designated self-discipline as the principle of individual achievement. Will you describe the part the self-discipline plays in personal achievement and indicate how this principle can be developed and applied in the practical affairs of daily life? Very well. Let's begin by calling attention to some of the uses of self-discipline after that. We will discuss the methods by which this important principle may become the possession of anyone who is willing to pay the price. Self-discipline begins with the mastery of one's thoughts. Without control over thoughts, there can be no control over deeds. Let us say, therefore, that self-discipline inspires one to think first and act afterwards. The usual procedure is just the reverse. Most people act first and think afterwards, if and when they think at all. Self-discipline gives us complete control over the 14 major emotions. This enables us to eliminate or subjugate the 7 negative emotions and exercise the 7 positive emotions in whatever manner we desire. The effect of this control becomes obvious when we recognize that emotion rules the lives of most people and largely rules the world. Self-discipline. must begin, if it begins at all, with a complete mastery of these 14 emotions. The 7 positive emotions: love, sex, hope, faith, enthusiasm, loyalty, desire. The 7 negative emotions: fear, jealousy, hatred, revenge, greed, anger, superstition. All these emotions are states of mind subject to subject to control and direction. The 7 negative emotions obviously deadly deadly if they are not mastered. The 7 positive emotions may also be just as destructive if they are not organized, mastered, and guided under complete control. And these 14 emotions is the mental dynamite that may lift us to great heights of achievement or reduce us to the lowest depths of failure. And no amount of education, experience, intelligence, or good intentions can alter or modify this possibility. All right, editor's choice. This is a core. This is a core theme of Carnegie's lessons and of Hill's subsequent teachings. Just as we have everything we need to be successful, we also have everything we need to self destruct. Our minds will act on whatever we feed them, good or bad. It's important to note that human nature, as is emphasized with technology and modern comforts, reverts to doing that which is easy, without a clear idea of what we want. It's much easier to fall victim to distraction and procrastination, which might be something as simple as binge watching television, gorging on junk food, or mindlessly scrolling through social media. Yet, if success is our goal, we must never lose sight of this balance between positive and negative emotions and of how these emotions influence our trajectory. 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 God damn it. You guys get it. Alright. I've had the honor of speaking on stages around the world, and in every presentation, I display a slide that says, each day, if you do not make the decision to win, you have automatically made the decision to lose. I repeat this. Look, alright, I'm gonna repeat this for you guys so you could. Alright. In every presentation, I display a slide that says, each day, if you do not make the decision to win, you have automatically made the decision to lose. This sentiment is directly influenced by Hill's lessons, suggesting that success who comes to those who become success conscious. Understanding this principle is a fundamental requirement for all who wish to be high achievers. Those who aren't success conscious eventually will be forced to concede to poverty, illness, and misery. Think and Grow Rich might just as well have been titled Think and Grow Poor. The premise is the same. Your first and most important battle is within. It seems obvious that lack of control of the 7 negative emotions may lead one to sure defeat, but it is not clear how one may use the 7 positive emotions for the achievement of desirable ends. Will you make this clear, Mr. Carnegie? Mr. Carnegie responded, yes, I will show you exactly how the positive emotions may have transmuted into a driving power that can be used in the attainment of any purpose. I can best do this by describing the way one man made effective use of his emotions. That man is Charlie Schwab, and my analysis of his use of emotions is based upon close association with him over a long period of years. Shortly after he began work with me, he made up his mind to become an indispensable part of my business family, thereby directing to a definite and end the emotions of desire. In carrying out his desire, he applied the following principles of achievement. definiteness of purpose, mastermind, attractive personality, applied faith, going the extra mile, organized endeavor, creative vision, self discipline. Through the principle of self discipline, he organized the other seven principles and brought them under his control. Reinforcing this self control, he placed all of his emotional feeling on and expressed it through his loyalty to his associates' enthusiasm over his work, hope of successful achievement in connection with his work, and faith in his ability to achieve. And reinforcing all these emotions was the emotion of love for his wife, whom Schwab was seeking to please by his achievements. The motive that inspired him to organize and use his emotions for the attainment of a definite end, as is obvious, was the twofold motive of a love and b desire for financial gain. Necessity is the mistress and guide of nature. Necessity is the theme and inventress of nature, her curb and her eternal law, by Leonardo da Vinci. All right. All right. Hill responded, I think I understand what you meant, Mr. Carnegie. Will you check me while I describe my understanding of Mr. Schwab's rise to power? First, he decided what he wanted, thereby putting into use the principle of definiteness of purpose. He adopted a plan for getting what he wanted, and he began carrying out his plan by going the extra mile, thereby making use also of the principle of organized endeavor. By working in harmony with you and his other associates, he made use of the mastermind principle. By his adoption of such a high aim, he showed that he understood and used the principle of creative vision, and also he demonstrated his understanding and application of the principle of applied faith by the pleasing, harmonious way he related himself to you and his other associates. He indicated his understanding and use of the principle of an attractive personality. Excuse me, guys. By the intelligent manner in which he used all these principles, and by sticking persistently to his undertaking until he completed it, he demonstrated his understanding and use of self-discipline, through which he subordinated all his desires to the one sole purpose of making himself an indispensable part of your organization. Behind this endeavor were the two motives of love for his wife and his desire for financial achievement, through which he harnessed and used all his positive emotions for the attainment of a definite purpose. Now, does that about state the case? Carnegie. That was the procedure followed, exactly, and you will notice that his chances of success would have been lessened had he failed to use any of the principles mentioned. It was through a carefully planned application of all these principles that he attained success. The application required self-discipline of the highest order. If he had squandered any of his emotional power in any other direction whatsoever, the results would have been different, a fact of which I am reminded by the experience of another man who started out to attain the same relationship in my organization that Charlie Schwab successfully attained. This man had everything that Charlie had. As far as ability was concerned, in addition to this, he had a much better education, having graduated from one of the best known colleges, where he specialized in industrial chemistry. He made just as effective use of every one of the principles mention as Charlie did, with one lone exception, that was the motive by which he was inspired. His motive was a desire for financial gain, not as a means of expressing love for his wife, but to feed his own vanity. He had a love for power, not as an expression of his pride of achievement, but as a means of lording his authority over other people. Despite this weakness, he climbed steadily until he became an official member of my mastermind group. Then he took a tumble, through which he dashed his hopes and his opportunity to piece to pieces by his arrogance and vanity. He was reduced to rank out of necessity for us to maintain harmony in our mastermind group, and wound it up finally at the bottom of the ladder, right where he started. His demotion inflicted a wound to his vanity from which he never recovered. What was this man's greatest weakness, Mr. Carnegie? I can answer that in 3 words. Lack of self-discipline. If he had gained mastery over his feelings, he could have succeeded with much less effort than Charlie Squab put into his job, because he had more education and possessed every other attribute of success the Squab possessed. He failed to control and direct his positive emotions. When he saw himself slipping, he began to give way to many of the negative emotions, particularly to jealousy, fear, and hatred. He was jealous of those who had succeeded. He hated them because they had excelled him, and he feared everyone, particularly himself. No one is strong enough to succeed with such an array of enemies as this working against him. Mr. Hill said, I judge from what you have said that personal power is something that must be used with discretion, or it may turn out to be a curse instead of a blessing. Is that correct? Mr. Carnegie answered, Yes, I have made it a part of my business philosophy to caution my associates against the dangers of indiscreet use of personal power, especially those who, through promotions, have but recently come into the possession of increased power. Newly acquired power is something like newly acquired riches. It needs watching closely lest a person become the victim of their. Alright, I'll tell you guys right now what it is. Alright. Person can become a victim of their own power. Here's where self-discipline gives a good account of itself. When people have their own mind under complete control, they make the mind serve them in a manner that does not antagonize other people. Alright, I'm gonna keep going now. Take a little break. Cheers, guys. Alright, let's keep going. We're already at page 13 right now. Alright, let's move on. Alright. Mr. Hill responded, If I understand you correctly, Mr. Carnegie, self-discipline calls for a complete mastery of the 7 negative emotions and a controlled guidance of the 7 positive emotions. In other words, people must stand with their feet on the necks of the 7 negative emotions while they organize and direct to a definite end the 7 positive emotions. Is that the idea? Mr. Carnegie responded, yes, but self discipline calls for mastery over traits of character other than the emotions. It calls for strict budgeting and use of time. It calls for mastery of the inborn trait of procrastination. If someone aims for a high station in life, they have no time to spend on non essential activities other than those they need for recreation. All right. In this passage, Carnegie introduces the importance of managing our time, specifically of ensuring that we have sufficient urgency, a clearly defined deadline for whatever we wish to accomplish. When this urgency is strapped to motive and packaged with mastery of the 14 emotions, we are far less likely to fall victim to distraction and procrastination, and far more likely to achieve our goals. Let's consider a simplified example at a university. We know that most students complete their assignments right before the due date, which might be 6 weeks or more away. However, if the professor said there was an assignment worth 60% of their grade that was due in 48 hours, do you think many students would wait before they made it their primary focus? Absolutely not. For every goal, goal you have, create a fixed deadline with clear milestones to track your progress along the way. Even the Pomodoro technique, a powerful tool for time management, relies on the urgency created by having a timer with a visible countdown placed on your workstation. Without this urgency, it's easy to finish the day and have nothing to show for it. Do you think your favorite entrepreneurs, athletes, and business leaders, the ones obsessed with breaking records and changing the world for the better, have time to waste? Will you name the traits of character that most often stand in the way of self-discipline? Mr. Carnegie asked. Mr. Hill asked. Mr. Carnegie responded, let us assume for the present that the major enemy of self discipline are the 7 negative emotions. These are the obstacles to which we must give attention first if we wish to be sure of success. Self discipline begins with the formation of constructive habits, especially the habits connected with food, drink, sex, and use of one's so called extra time. Generally speaking, when we get these habits under control, they help to regulate all our other habits. Consider, for example, what definiteness of purpose does to fix our habits. When we begin to apply the principle of going the extra mile, we make a long step forward in the establishment of constructive habits because in doing more than we are paid for, we are forced to budget our time to better advantage. Consider then what happens when we become obsessed with a strong motive that we begin to express through the principle of organized endeavor, in conjunction with the principle of creative vision. By the time we get control of these principles, we have already gone a long distance toward the adoption of habits that of themselves constitute the finest sort of self-discipline. Do you see how this works? All right. We're going to move on to next page. All right. So Mr. Hill responded, yes, I do. And I can see too that everything we do centers around the primary motive behind our definite major purpose. Motive really is the starting point of all achievement. Is it not? Uh, Carnegie responded, "Yes, that is right. But you should take care to say that this motive must be obsessional. That is, it must be so strong that it impels people to subordinate all their thoughts and efforts to its attainment. Too often, people don't distinguish between motive and a mere wish. Wishing will not bring success. If it did, everyone would be successful because all people have wishes. They wish for everything, from the earth to the moon. But wishes and daydreams amount to nothing until they are fanned into a hot flame of desire based upon a definite motive, and this must become the dominating influence of their mind. It must be given obsessional proportions sufficient to cause action. Those motives that serve as a driving force behind one's chosen major purpose should be underscored and emphasized so they will not be overlooked. They should be included also in the written description of one's definite major purpose. A definite purpose without an obsessional motive behind it is useless as a locomotive without any steam in the boiler. Motive motive is the thing that gives power, action, and persistence to one's plans. All right, so there's this quote from Jim Rohns. Without a sense of urgency, desire loses its value. That's so true. All right, so we're gonna keep going. So Mr. Hill responded, "That reminds me to ask you, Mr. Carnegie, what is your motive in spending all this time coaching me to organize this achievement philosophy? You have more material riches than you need. You have recognition as the leading industrialist of the world. Your entire life has been a stupendous success. And as far as I can see, there is nothing you desire that you do not already possess." Mr. Carnegie responded, "Now that is where you are wrong. I do not have everything I wish. It is true that I have more material riches than I need, as is evidenced by the fact that I am giving my money away as rapidly as I can do so safely. But there is something I want more than all else, and it is an obsessional desire to provide the people of America with a safe and dependable philosophy by which they may acquire riches in their highest form, riches that will enable people to relate themselves to one another so that they may find peace of mind, happiness, and joy in the responsibilities of life. My obsessional desire grew out of my experiences with people, through which I have learned of the great need for such a philosophy. It is the exception rather than the rule when I find a person who is trying to benefit themselves without damaging others. On other hand, on every hand, I see people unwisely trying to get something for nothing, although I know well enough that all they will get is grief and disappointment. My motive in helping to organize a dependable philosophy of individual achievement is the same as that which prompts some people to erect great monuments of stone to mark the spot where their earthly remains will finally rest. Monuments of stone crumble with time and go back to dust. But there is a type of monument that can be made eternal, and it will last as long as civilization itself. It is the monument a person may build in the hearts of others through some form of constructive service that benefits humankind as a whole. It is such a monument that I hope to build through your cooperation, and May I suggest that in helping me to build it, you may let it serve as long you may let it serve also as your own monument. Mr. Hill Mr. Hill responded, I see your point, Mr. Carnegie. Was that your motive at the outset of your career? Mr. Carnegie responded, no, it was not. In the beginning, I was motivated by a desire for self expression and the desire for financial influence with which to make that. To make that expression widespread in its influence, but in carrying out my original motive, I happily hit upon a bigger and a nobler motive, the motive of making people instead of making money. I caught the vision of that great motive as the result of having discovered in the process of making money the great need for better people. If civilization is to evolve to still higher standards of living or hold even the gains it has made, we must be taught higher standards of human relationship than those that now prevail. And above all, people must learn that there are riches vastly greater than any represented by material things. The need for this wider vision is sufficient to challenge even the greatest people. It was this challenge to which I responded when my obsessional motive became that of giving the people a sound philosophy of individual achievement. All right. All right. Carnegie's effectiveness as a business person is surpassed only by that of which his philanthropic efforts as Don Green, executive director of the Napoleon Hill Foundation, noted in the foreword. The steel magnate's commitment to help civilization unlock its potential is still evident around the world today. There is a misconception that money is the root of all evil, when in fact, having more resources at our disposal not only provides us with freedom to structure our days however we like and the ability to contribute to the causes we care about most, but also allows us to fund innovation that improves our standard of living and enhances the quality of life for people everywhere. Carnegie was driven by a purpose far greater than himself, one that he hoped would ignite a flame of ambition around the world and give people the greatest gift, the ability to help themselves. More than 100 years have his passing. We see how Carnegie's example is met by today's leading figures such as Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and Li Ka-shing, who, after achieving their business objectives, turned their hands to philanthropy. This philanthropic focus, primarily on education and healthcare, aims to create peace, cure disease, and raise the standard of living for people everywhere. In addition to offering great financial generosity, Carnegie provided his achievement philosophy so refined and circulated by Hill in books such as this one, in hopes that it would teach people above all else to be self sufficient. The more resources you have at your disposal, the more you're able to help others. That leads us to another fundamental theme in this book. The best way to help others is to help yourself first. Alright, so Mr. Hill responded, From all you have said, I deduce that self-discipline is largely a matter of the adoption of constructive habits. Is that the idea? Mr. Carnegie responded, That is precisely the idea. What a person is and what a person accomplishes, both in failure and success, is the result of that person's habits. Fortunately, habits are self formed. They are under the control of the individual. The most important of these are the habits of thought. One comes, finally, to resemble in one's deeds the nature of one's thought habits. Gaining control over these thought habits goes a long way towards the attainment of self discipline. Definite motives are the beginning of thought habits. It is not difficult for someone to keep their mind on the thing that serves as their greatest motive, especially if the motive becomes obsessional. Self discipline without definiteness of motive is impossible. Moreover, it would be without value. I have seen I have seen fakers in India who had such perfect discipline, self discipline, that they could sit all day long on the sharp points of nails drivers through a board, but their discipline was useless because there was no constructive motive behind it. Dr. Hill responded, "If I understand you correctly, Mr. Carnegie, self discipline, in the sense that it is designated as one of the major principles of the individual achievement, has reference to complete mastery of both our thought habits and our physical habits. Is that your idea?" Mr. Carnegie responded, "Yes, that is correct. Self discipline means exactly what the word implies: complete discipline over self. It calls for a balancing of the emotions of the heart and the reasoning faculty of the head. That is, we must learn to respond to both our reaction and our feelings according to the nature of each circumstance, calling for our decisions. Sometimes it will be necessary to set aside emotions entirely and allow our head to rule. In matters of physical relationships, this ability becomes highly important. Would it not be safer if a person controlled their life with their reasoning faculty, leaving the emotions out of their decisions and plans?" asked Mr. Hill. Mr. Carnegie responded, "No, that would be very unwise, even if it were possible, because the emotions provide the driving power, the action force that enables us to put our head decisions into operation. The remedy is control and discipline of the emotions, not elimination of them. Moreover, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to eliminate the great emotional nature of human beings. Our emotions are like a river in that their power can be dammed up and released in whatever proportions and whatever direction one desires, but they cannot be eliminated through self discipline. We can organize our emotions and release them in a highly concentrated form as a means of attaining the object of our plans and purposes. The two most powerful emotions are love and sex. These emotions are inborn, the handiwork of nature, the instruments through which the Creator provided for both the perpetuation of the human race and the social integration by which civilization evolves from a lower to a higher order of human relationship. One would hardly wish to destroy so great a gift as the emotions, even if this were possible, because they represent humankind's greatest power. If you destroyed hope and faith, that would you what would you have left that would be wise? Wait, what would you have left that would be of use? If you wait, if you remove enthusiasm, loyalty, and the desire for achievement, you would still have left the faculty of reason, the head power. But what good would it be? There would be nothing left for the head to direct. Now let me call your attention to an astounding truth. The emotions of hope, faith, enthusiasm, loyalty, and desire are nothing but specialized applications of the inborn emotions of love and sex, diverted or transmuted into different purposes. In fact, every human emotion outside of love and sex has its roots in these two natural inborn traits. If these two natural elements were destroyed, that person would become as docile as an animal that has been desexed. The reasoning faculty would remain, but what could be done with it? Hill, Hill asked. Self-discipline, then, is the tool with which we may harness and direct our inborn emotions in whatever direction we choose. Carnegie responded, "That is correct, and now I wish to call your attention to another astounding truth. Creative vision is the result of self-discipline through which the emotions of self, of love, and sex are transmuted into some specialized plan or purpose. No great leader in any form of human endeavor has ever attained leadership without mastery and direction of these two great inborn emotions. The great the wait, the great artists, musicians, writers, speakers, lawyers, doctors, architects, inventors, scientists, industrialists, and salespeople, and the astounding people in all walks of life attain their leadership of harnessing and directing their natural emotions of love and sex as the driving force behind their endeavors. In most instances, the diversion of these emotions into specialized endeavor is done unconsciously as the result of a burning desire for achievement. In some instances, the transmutation is deliberate. Mr. Hill responded, "Then it is no disgrace for one to be born with great capacity for the emotions of love and sex." Mr. Carnegie responded, The disgrace. No, the disgrace comes from the abuse of these natural gifts. The abuse is the result of ignorance, the lack of training as to the lack of training as to the nature and potentialities of these great emotions. Alright, so we have this quote by Latin maxim: practices, zealously pursued, become habits. Alright, so Hill responded, "From what you have said, Mr. Carnegie, I get the impression that the most important application of self discipline is that through which we take possession of our love and sex emotions and transform them into whatever form of endeavor we desire. Is that true?" Mr. Carnegie responded, "You have caught the idea precisely, and I may add that when we acquire discipline through these two emotions, we will find it easy to discipline ourselves in all other directions because those emotions are reflected either consciously or unconsciously in practically everything we do. Failure to gain control over the emotions of love and sex generally means failure to gain control over other traits. Take the case of Charles Dickens, for example. Early in life, he met with a great disappointment in love. Instead of allowing his unrequired love emotions to destroy him, he transmuted that great driving force into a novel called David Copperfield, which brought him fame and fortune and led him to create other literary works that made him a master of his field. Abraham Lincoln was a mediocre lawyer who had failed dismally at everything he had undertaken until the deep wells of his emotion were opened wide by his great sorrow over the death of Anne Rutledge, the only woman he ever truly loved. He converted his sorrow into a public service that made him one of America's immortals. It is regrettable that none of his biographers caught the significance of or made explanatory references to the tragedy that marked the turning point in the life of the great statesman. See, all right, guys, I'm gonna take a break. Hey, I appreciate you for staying tuned, man. Thank you so much for the love and support.